for joining us today. My name is Tay Johnson. Just to give you a brief overview about myself, I'm the Senior Data Analyst for the Insights Analytics team. And today we have three amazing panelists here. And I had the pleasure of working with them and talking to them. And they seem really, really cool and down to earth. First, we have, of course, Pamela Kieger. She is the Principal Demand Sensing Analyst. And I'm going to have a lot of questions about that because I don't even know what a sensing analyst is. So we're going to talk about that later. But she was from Boston Scientific. And then next, we have Elaine Steffen. She's the head of customer engineering at Google. We know Google very well, so we see Elaine a lot. And next up, we definitely have Nicole Nelson. She's the Chief Experimentation Officer at N Squared Advisory. Now, I want to know what that means, but we'll definitely get into that later. So depending on where you sit, you're going to see different types of data and different processes. So I think as we continue our conversation, you'll see that evolve more and more, where you'll start to learn not just about data analytics, but the type of work that we do and how it varies depending on. Of course, I'm going to ask you, Elaine, the same question. How has your career evolved over time? Now you can start. Yeah, if you would like to.
I mean, I think if you look at the beginning, not surprisingly, I think most of us start with, somebody saying, here's a project, go figure out this answer, go figure out how. Is this cut?
It is.
Hold on. Okay, you'll shut that one off. All right. So started off with, solving problems that other people were giving you direction for. How did the earth move during an earthquake? Or what will we price a policy at to make money? Those kinds of things. And I think one of the fun turning points in my career was I was working at a company that managed fleets of cars and trucks for other companies. We put a telematics system in there. We didn't exactly know what we were going to do, but we thought it'd be useful to be able to track where vehicles were going. And suddenly I switched from just creating these systems to really helping the companies figure out what else the system could do. And so while we put this in the systems, and you think about fleets of vehicles like Comcast trucks or things like that. And suddenly looking at the data and realizing that there's uses and there's ways to sell value out of this that we hadn't thought about. That said, for a roofing company, suddenly we had the way to solve a billing dispute. That when somebody said, hey, this guy didn't do 8 hours of work at our house, we had the answer. And suddenly in looking at the data, we realized that we could save these companies all kinds of money, because if you think about a cable guy in the state of Minnesota, they likely weren't shutting their engine off when they went to a job in the dead of winter because they didn't want to get in a cold car and they weren't paying for the gas. And suddenly we had visibility into this and we could change the behavior. But we started down the path because we just wanted to understand what these vehicles were. And so suddenly this kind of light bulb moment of, there's so many uses if you think more broadly about the value the data can provide. And so really pivoted from the point of, creating systems that people were designing and I was implementing to going, how do we think differently about this? I was hired into a company to create their data science function, a company that had all kinds of data around the movement of goods, and they collected 15 years of data and they never used it for anything. And the question was, what value can you unlock? And so how do you step back and think about those things? And, then kind of the fun twist of joining Google is, rather than now doing that for one company, kind of being able to help all kinds of companies in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin really figure out, what is special in the data? How do we unlock that value? What kinds of new monetization can you get by the data that you have?
So let's see, how did it evolve in the career? I think I told you a little bit about the beginning of my career when I was mostly applying it myself. And then I kind of got into a role where we were rolling out price optimization software, and it wasn't always going as easy as you might think. And so it was after that, for the very first time, I got put on a project to bring a group of analytics data science together. And one of the really smart things we did, and I think one of the biggest learnings, is we brought the business team, the data science team, and the technology team together to create a business case holistically. The technology team had been trying to fund a new data warehouse and it hadn't gone anywhere. And so I was brought in to kind of help create this business case. And it was this extremely powerful moment of kind of realizing the three parts of that stool have to be working together. Data is not just the analyst sitting alone by themselves. It is the business user who's going to be using it to make decisions. It is the technology team that's creating the data or finding the tools. And so I would say that was one big pivot in my career, to just understand holistically those three things coming together. For that transformation, I think the other part, which I think data scientists will understand. So we did this transformation, and I would say we got 80% of what we wanted, not 100. So me being me, I was like, well, why? Why didn't we get all the way there? And I didn't build a model. But what I did, I actually went back for a master's in organizational development, because I wanted to understand the people side of things, because it felt like that was the part we didn't do as well, right? That the vision wasn't exactly the same in everyone's head, and we didn't, necessarily hit the team with all the right moments and information they needed. So I went to learn about that. And I think that was sort of that second pivot, and where I find the most passion in the data scientist field today is just the people side of it. Working with the business leaders to help them understand what's possible and get them to come along with the drive. Working with the data scientists, because at least for people know, like, I love them. I truly do. They were my people. And when I hung out with them, I'm like, these are my people. But, they're not just people who sit in a cube and code. Like, you have to think about what they want and what matters to them, and how you make it an environment where they thrive.
I mean, I think the first part of the question is, how do you come up with that great idea, right? When I think back to my days at Breakthrough, when I was hired to figure out what the value was inside of their data, the first question was, okay, so where do you even start? How do you come up with that? Because I think that's the first place people struggle, is you come up with the obvious answers, and those often aren't the ones that are going to give you the best revenue. When someone has a really great idea, it's often easy to get buy-in on it, but how do you get a group of people to come together, think creatively about it, experiment? And I think that's a cultural piece, right? Like, creating a culture that is willing to fail fast, that is inquisitive, right? That you've challenged people to think differently. And when I started this data science team, we would have, we'd play games and try and find stuff in the data. And then to your point, like, it's the partnership with the business, right? And I can remember my data scientists going, running to the business and going, if I could do this for you, would it be interesting, right? Because that's the question. Would this provide value? Could you monetize this if I could give you this answer? And then I think the piece of it is making sure that you can do this in a cost-effective way. I remember when I joined Breakthrough, and the technology team came to me. At that point, I wasn't running technology, and they're like, how large of a machine do you want for your what specs do you want for your machine? And I'm like, I don't want a machine, because the next experiment I'm going to want, it needs to be bigger. I need to be in the cloud, because I need the barrier of entry to be small. I need to not have to ask for $50,000 to run an experiment that might fail. I need to be able to run that experiment for a few $100s and learn the answer. And so, switching it so that you can fail fast. Many times it's those cultural things. There isn't a silver bullet to coming up with that great idea, but the more you can put people's ideas together, their heads together, the more you have a team that's looking out to the world for inspiration, that is, being inspired by things, the more they will come and bring that inspiration to you as well.
Yeah. So great answers thus far. I think the two things I might add is, one, start with your corporate strategy. What is important about your company? When we took our first chance at it at Target, we started with merchandising, analytics. When you think of Target, you think about unique product, right? That's part of what differentiates it. So think about what differentiates your company. Or what is a pressing problem at the moment? When I joined Best Buy, pricing was a big deal. And so if you align your project, which is to something that is on the minds of that executive team, you're going to have a better chance of quote unquote getting buy-in. The second piece that I will say, which, depending on where you go, but it's worked at least at two of these companies, be honest with that executive team on what you can do and what you can't do. One of the first, when we did the first big transformation and we were asking for hundreds of millions of dollars, believe it or not, for the very first time at our capital committee, we went in with an MPV that had a $200 million range, which had never happened. And if you guys know finance people, like this, they do not like this. And we said, well, so there's 8 things we're going to do, or there's 10 things we're going to do. 7 of them are going to work, and we don't know which of the 7 they're going to be. And so instead of doing this typical like capital ask for 5 years, we're going to come back to you every year, and we're going to tell you what worked, and we're going to tell you what didn't work. And I think that level of sort of being honest with them, and, you know, if you're an executive who's been told, oh, I have to get more data driven, so on and so forth, it sort of makes them part of it, right? You're talking to them about it. They're feeling like they're on the journey with you, I think was really pivotal to what we did. You know, and Elaine talked about the transferability. As you go through more and more problems, you know, I guess the one thing I would tell you is don't wait till everything is perfect. Your data will never be perfect. I'm pretty sure Elaine will say, even at Google, the data is not perfect. Or at least I've heard that rumor behind the scenes. So start, right? Like you may not have a machine learning model day one, right? You might have some, you know, SQL quote, like, if you have a problem, start working on it. You're going to continue to mature. You're going to get better data. You're going to get better technology. You're going to get better buy-in, but don't feel like you have to wait till the conditions are perfect to start.
Okay, so we want to leave a little bit of space for audience questions. I wrote down a couple that we have already received in the queue, and just want to say there was mentions of this panel being all women, despite the fact that it is not a women in tech event. So just really excited. Props to all of you for paving paths for my daughter. So thank you for all of your hard work. I have questions, like I said, here that we have received virtually. I also want to leave space for people in the room. Is there anyone who just has like a dying question? You're like, I have to ask this. Otherwise, I can ask the ones that I have in my cards. All right, go for it, Al says. Okay, so, hello. Carla, nice to meet you.
I would just love to know your experience with your biggest data dropped fall, and how did you recover from it?
What was the biggest one? Can you repeat the question?
The
biggest data drop fall. I could probably come up with that one.
That's a tough one.
I have one that immediately came to mind, although there may be worse, but the one that comes to mind is, so I worked at Target. It was Thanksgiving, which I don't know for you in the retail, it's kind of an important day. And I worked for the website, and we had a data upload of what was supposed to be Black Friday prices. And they were 3 rows off in the upload. So $500 products were going to go for $5. Yeah, no, totally true. At about midnight on, I wish I could remember what year, probably 2012, you could have gotten a really good deal on some items. So yes, very much like literally, I remember being up at midnight, 2 a.m. on that night as we were working to try to get them all down and uploaded correctly. So that is the one that comes to mind as the most painful.
You know, I'm up at midnight on Black Friday too, but like different reasons.
Yeah, I guess for me, years ago, I was working on a system and long before the cloud, I was helping Verizon with call pattern analysis. And so most of the time, if you make a local call, they never record it. We turned on the switches to record all the data of every call that was happening. So just gloms and gloms of data. It literally took us a full week of just loading steady into this database to do this. And a coworker and I were working on this and thought we were in the development environment and we were just going to purge a couple of tables, right? And it was a lot of data, so it seemed simpler just to drop the table and not worry about it. And so quickly we just went ahead and dropped the table, which meant there was no recovery whatsoever, and realized that we had just dropped an entire week's worth of data when the deadline was less than a week away. So we didn't even have enough clock time to recover from this. And to me, it was a good lesson in kind of what I always talk to my team about is you can never take the human error out as long as there's humans. So make sure you're 2 steps away from making a stupid mistake that is unrecoverable. That there should always be oops protection in the middle of this. And the only thing we did was fess up and went from there.
Well, I wouldn't say my example is necessarily a dropped ball, but like a perpetual feeling of you are dropping the ball somehow. This is a byproduct of working with students and faculty at MIT on your problem. If there is something quirky about your data, they will find it. They will absolutely find it. And there's that moment of panic when you see the question coming from, that student about your data, and you think, we didn't send them garbage, did we? And it's a little uncomfortable. I'm used to pulling my own data. And in this role, we're working with data across so many different systems, so many different groups. It would be impossible for me to pull all of it myself. And so I'm reliant on other people. And so it's that moment of going back, double checking. I asked for X. Did you give me X? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Okay, now here's 50 questions about why that looks that way. And so it's sort of that panic when you're working with external people and, you don't want to mess up all of their work. So, yeah. It's a good endeavor though in the end.
Okay, one of the other questions was someone on the panel said that data will never be perfect. Does saying that make getting leadership buy-in more difficult? And so then how do you make the sell? I'm excited to hear your answer on this as well.
I think we both said it. Yeah, you definitely said it. But I think I may have also, but.
Well, so data's never perfect. Does that affect leadership buy-in is the question? No, it totally doesn't affect leadership buy-in. Leaders buy in all the time at everything. So I talked a bit before about being transparent. I do think sometimes data science teams feel pressure to say that they can do perfect things. And I do think that sort of honesty of saying, look, we had an example a few months ago, right, where supply chain things were sort of backed up at the carrier and we had to figure out what to unload first. And instead of saying, we were like, look, we've looked at the data. It's not perfect. We're like pulling out of 7 different systems. They don't match. We said, so we're not going to, it's not going to be perfect, but we can probably give you an answer that says, 80% of it, like you're going to be going in the right direction. Maybe we're not going to get it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 right, but the top 10 will be right. So I think and let's be honest, most leaders, they're not perfect either. If you look a leader in the eye and say, have you ever screwed up? Most of them, not all of them, but most of them will say yes. So I think if you are open about it, maybe the other thing is, and when you find out that you screwed up, because it will happen, make that phone call first. Do not let that, hope they don't notice it, so on and so forth. Pick up that phone, tell them, yep, we found it, we screwed it up. This is what I'm going to do to make it right. And this is the path forward.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, when you think about data and quality issues, I always think about kind of, am I doing analytics and reporting or am I doing data science, right? When I'm doing analytics and reporting, it's important for it to be consistent. It'll never be perfect and that should never stop you from getting there. When you're looking at data science, oftentimes I tell the team, stop cleaning it up so much. Like there's meaning in the noise. There's meaning in the uncleanliness of the data. And I think we oftentimes clean up the data, trying to get to data and analytics, and then try and use that copy for data science versus using the raw data that has all these other messages in it that we've eventually cleaned back out. And so sometimes rejoice in the fact that your data is not clean.
Well, I work in med device. So let's start there. So high stakes, right? And so it's not even a question of, okay, is this data perfect? It's even a question of, okay, we've been told this data is fine, but we still have questions about it. And we're going to pace the hallways. The statistician and I would pace the hallways, not necessarily even knowing if there was an issue with the data, but just, keeping tabs on it, making sure it was clean to our standards. And so actually the emotional toll of knowing the responsibility of ensuring your data is up to standards is real. I mean, there were blood, sweat, and tears over that. I joke, but it can be very stressful, especially in med tech when your data is not perfect. And we talked about culture earlier. And I think having an open culture that, when you even have a question about the data, that you're able to get quick answers. If there is something that comes up, that it's resolved quickly and transparently, so that those of us who are using that data feel very comfortable with all the reports and work that we're doing that builds on that data. So I would say if your culture is not open and it's high stakes, that's when you start seeing people walk out because, it's too emotionally draining. Yeah.